Welcome to another episode of the ChiselMe Podcast, the podcast where we break the rough edges, sharpen the soul, and build the man within. I'm your host, Miguel Foster. Every episode is a lesson, a story, or a letter designed to carve you into the man or woman you were meant to be. This is where transformation begins, one intentional cut at a time. In a world where many young men are taught to react before they think, to defend their pride before they understand, and sometimes to use force before they use their voice, today's conversation challenges that narrative. Because true strength is not found in volume, aggression, or dominance, but in clarity of thought, emotional discipline, and the ability to resolve conflict with wisdom. Today, I'm joined by an amazing young man who represents that mindset, in my opinion. He is the president of the Wolmer's Boys debating team. He can tell me more about himself afterwards. He is the driving force behind, in my opinion, and proven statistically, the number one debating team in Jamaica right now. And he will be speaking with us today about the power of thinking critically, listening intentionally, and speaking with purpose. Our guest for today is Mr. Kyle Kameka. Welcome, Kyle.
Thank you so much, sir. That was a wonderful introduction, I must say.
You're welcome. Now, could you please give us a quick synopsis about who you are, please?
Who I am, I could go different directions with this one time, but I'd say that in many respects, I'm a leader. I'm a hard worker. For the most part, as you mentioned, I'm pretty much focused on debating, so I do like oratorship in that regard. But also, certain different leadership capacities in my school, forum captain, different vice presidents, and social media managers and PRO roles here and there about, and also avid sports watcher as well. So a lot of things, but as you mentioned as well, I really particularly focus on debating at this current point in my life.
Okay, great. And debating is something that we have in common, other than the fact that we are both Seventh-day Adventists. So I know that you're also involved in church, right?
Yes, definitely. I get this.
Yes, definitely involved in church. But we met through our debating endeavors in 2024, and
Yes.
during my short time at Wolmer's for one academic year, we had what you would call a generational run, where from January till the end of the academic year and even beyond, the team was undefeated. And
Yes.
it wasn't until, what was it, this month or last month, that unfortunately the team didn't win a match.
That was definitely a run to be remembered from, I think it was the entire year of 2020, 2025. That consistency was unmatched.
Yes, and we're looking to definitely reach back to those heights, because now we're preparing for, like, was it 2 or 3 competitions we're in right now?
Yeah, three of them, in fact. Three of them.
Yeah, 3 competitions, and we're planning to win all of them by the end of the
100%.
academic year. So that would be the repeat. And then hopefully the academic year 2025, 2026 will be the legendary 3P. At which point the core team that we have now will go their separate ways. Or maybe not go their separate ways, but carry on their skills in, 1 or 2 universities that they'll find common. Most likely UA or UTech. But we'll see, right?
Definitely. We will see. We'll see.
Yeah. Now, this conversation, is mainly about you. I'd love to hear your thoughts. But I'll preface the first question by saying this, that I believe that debating definitely enriched my life when I started doing it in my time in university. Before, I was very shy, very reserved. I think I'm still reserved, but through debating, I found a voice. And debating also helped me to refine how I speak, how I reason, how I articulate myself. Without going too much in depth about me, I'll ask you first, Kyle. How has being a debater shaped the way you think, react, and handle disagreements as a young man?
I think debating has had a fundamental impact on me in pretty much all facets of my life. And you talk about agreements and, well, disagreements, in fact, 100%. I think what debating does, it provides for you this weird phenomenon where you're seeing two different or two completely opposing realities, but they're not necessarily false. You can prove both of them. And as I go more into debates, what I realize is the same thing with humans and interacting with people, which is you don't necessarily meet someone and say, oh, you're just thinking of something wrong. You invite them into understanding their perspective and their context. And what changes is now, oh, this is someone something I disagree with or a value I disagree with. That's intentional in how I view interactions with debating because of the fact that nothing is inherently false, right? You start to have conversations like, I want to just understand who you are, what's your context, why do you come to this conclusion? I want a conversation shift from just what is right and what is wrong to know, hey, how do you get to this conclusion? Why is the experiences that you have built over time allowed you to come to this general conclusion? You have fruitful discussions, and you also go away from the type of disagreements that often occur where persons just get fiercely loyal for what they believe in, and you have conversations that are very polar, very, very distant, and you're kind of just fighting instead of really having a connection right there. So in terms of those type of verbal disagreements, that's something debating has really transformed my life into understanding persons for who they are rather than understanding their perspectives on a very surface level view. And that's transformative, to say the very least.
Thank you. And I noticed you said something that I'd like to highlight once again. In the world of competitive debating, you said that nothing is inherently wrong. Now, somebody who is not used to competitive debating will hear that and say then, but if you were to debate certain topics like the LGBTQ or the justification of certain crimes, trust me, in debating, we have debated these topics before, even if they went against our moral or personal value system. But it's not about upholding the wrong or promoting the wrong, but realizing that it's not good to just jump to a place of condemnation when something goes against our worldview, but taking the time to listen to another person's perspective. Would you agree with that?
100%. 100%.
Yep, because when it comes on to debating, like the current format that the team mainly debates in, the Jade format, it is like a government and opposition, and not only does each member of the team get 7, 6, and 5 minutes respectively to speak passionately and bring across their points, they also have to listen for 7, 6, and 5 minutes to the other 3 members on the other team as they give their points as well. And while points of information are allowed during each speech, what I like about the Jade format is that there is a dedicated time to cross-questioning where you can ask your questions and the other person responds, and likewise the person or the persons on the opposing team can ask you their questions and you respond as well.
I think something you mentioned there, Mr. which it kind of brought me back to another point that I think I've learned from this, is the art of listening. Persons don't tend to realize the importance of listening to someone when they're communicating, especially in a time of conflict. You hear heated discussions, not debates, not even logical conversations, just something as simple as what someone's supposed to wear, where we're going out in sort of a dating context, or just with your friend talking about something controversial, a football topic. What you hear is a lot of overlapping of noise, and that's usually where disagreements start to get out of hand. But when someone takes a step back and listens for that 7 minutes, and though you can be very impatient when you listen to a lot of points that you want to report right in the moment, it makes you a better person and gives you greater interpersonal skills. When you have to listen to those 7 minutes and really suffer through them when you're in a debate, you can suffer through the 2 minutes of someone giving you a lot of information you don't necessarily agree with. And then taking the time to synthesize them like you synthesize rebuttals and coming to the right conclusion instead of just berating them with that same negative energy or the same negative commentary that you had from the start. So that's also something I had to add there when you mentioned that wonderful point on how the formats of debate work, and especially the Jade parliamentary format.
True. So what I'd like for you to do now is describe a situation in which a real life situation in an interpersonal relationship where you had to sit in a disagreement instead of immediately reacting. Unlike how in our matches, sometimes we jump up and we say point of information, which in layman terms is our way of saying I beg to differ. Describe a situation in which you had to listen to an opposing view from someone, maybe not in a formal way, but you had to really take the time to process what someone said or was expressing, even if you didn't agree with it in the moment.
That's a very interesting question. I remember actually, I couldn't give the specifics of the details, but I was speaking to someone on in a bit of a leadership context, and I was asking the person to make a sacrifice. And what happened was that we're just working on two different planes of understanding. One person was kind of going for more, they went to their self as more of the primary way of looking at this conversation. And then I was pretty much looking at a very self-sacrificial way of looking at it. And that conversation really got very tense for me. And what I had to do was step back and understand why was this person thinking through that perspective. And it took a while for me to realize that, I need to understand the reason why this person is coming from here. It doesn't necessarily have to just be them being selfish. It comes from something deeper, which I'm not going to be able to understand right now. And probably I'm not going to be able to ask this person in the moment. But it's going to have to take my time to step back and to treat this person with a different sort of respect or a certain different type of conversational style. Not necessarily just berating them or just being that type of person, but to kind of soften my tone and understand I don't know what this person is going through and listen to where they're coming from and then to respond to them accordingly. So again, I don't want to give the specifics, but in a situation like that, when you're asking someone to do what you hold to so dearly, which is sacrificing yourself for the betterment of others, and they don't want to do it, you have to understand that though you have been raised that way, and though it seems so intuitive for you to do it, you have to understand persons have gone through things that you can't imagine, and you can't judge automatically and consider them or label them certain things just because it seems like a whole picture. So that's a bit of a vague example, but that's a good example.
Thank you. There are certain situations in which one hears an opposing view or unfavorable sentiments to one's psyche that is not easy to process. But there is great power and effectiveness in sitting in conflict without immediately blowing up and reacting. Now, we have a certain age difference to us, so I'm not going to assume that you've been in certain situations before, but I've been doing a lot of growing, and I have definitely learned a lot, and I'm still learning about how to handle conflicts. I know that there's a time when if something unfavorable was said to me, especially in an interpersonal relationship with a friend or let's say a partner, because of my passion in wanting to prove myself right, I'd be more likely to impulsively respond, and not just impulsively respond to justify myself, but to also meticulously break down the other person's side. One of the hard truths to admit is that when it comes down to conflict, logic doesn't always rule the day. Emotions tend to play a greater role in conflict, and it's important to understand that emotions will vary in terms of intensity and manner of expression across different individuals, and compassion is very important in those delicate moments as well. So, so it's good to know how to slow down when being in the midst of conflict and not being too quick to respond. So even though we're talking from a place of debating, it's not just about proving yourself right or knowing how to reason, but it's also giving a person the space to listen and also allowing silence as well. One of the most uncomfortable experiences I had was with an employer at a certain point in my life, and I had a situation with that employer where the employer did not like my performance, and I had to sit down for 1 hour and listen to that employer lay into me, and say all kind of things that they don't like about my performance, to the point where the person was making some assumptions that I didn't like. And at one point I wanted to respond, and the person said to me, don't respond. This is not a debate. Don't try to shut me up now. And I find it so sad that people tend to be so intimidated when it comes on to conflicts, where persons are not willing to hear another person's side or give another person space to respond. And this is not to be belittling now, but understanding that emotions run high and people respond in emotion in different ways. Some persons are very expressive and other persons are, they shut down. Everybody expresses in different way, and it's good to give space for that. And it took me weeks, I'd say, to really process that entire situation. But when it comes on to conflict, it's good to slow down and process so that you don't react impulsively, if you understand what I'm saying.
I think that's so important, because we think, well, in my Jamaican context, for example, what I see, and I think both of us living in this country for quite some time, well, of course you have migrated now, we see that what happens usually in conflicts is just this back and forth, no pausing. And when you do the research, you see that one of the most effective techniques of breaking conflict is just one person stopping and just letting silence enter the room. No one saying it. Just holding that silence. It does so much for your inbuilt anger, and also for the other person in kind of reflecting, realizing probably I said a lot of things that I wasn't supposed to say. But also what you mentioned, which is stepping back, which is most persons don't do that. Most persons think to maintain my ego and this wild sense of pride that I have to go and go back and forth with this person, crush them as best as possible, instead of saying, listen, I'm gonna have to take the step back from my own self and secure myself by not saying what I want to say and taking some time for myself to eventually respond to that person, granted, but respond to them from a position of strength, not to the strength that society tells you, but the strength which is clarity, composure, and the right response that doesn't impact this relationship or this conversation or both of us negatively at all. So I really do appreciate what you did there, which is stepping back instead of immediately just jumping into it as a back-to-back battle of sorts. Yeah.
Yes, when in the Jamaican context, as you said, there is great strength in walking away, and there is great strength in being quiet. And when it comes on to masculinity, that's not something that's really exalted or seen as masculine, where if somebody diss you or disrespect you, you're expected to retaliate or respond in that moment. But there is great power in getting a sense of ire or rebuke from someone, and where necessary, walk away. Not even for a time, but if you can walk away forever, it's just best to walk away. It's like what Kenny Rogers said. I don't know if you know. Do you know Kenny Rogers?
Yes, I know. Wonderful country artist.
Yeah, and he sang this song about the coward of the county. No, not the coward of the county. This was the gambler. That was the gambler. And the chorus said, you have to know when to hold them know when to
Mhm.
fold them, know when to walk away, know when to run.
Yeah.
There is great discernment in knowing when to do any of these actions. Because I'm not saying
Definitely.
anybody should be a doormat and allow
Hmm.
persons to step up on them. But you have to know when to walk away or run away from certain situations. Because honestly, it's not worth it trying to prove your masculinity or your rights if it's gonna cost you your freedom or even more your peace of mind. Because I've had
Exactly.
situations in the past where I've defended myself in the face of mischaracterization, and
Yeah.
just the fact that just the fact that I used so much energy in trying to defend myself, I felt even worse than before.
Yeah.
So I learned that, you know what, for peace of mind, and not only for peace of mind, but for public relations, in terms
Hmm.
of just being in good standing with certain groups and certain people, it's just best to let things go, because sometimes adding fuel to the fire just makes the aftermath a lot worse. So it's just best to let certain things go, let God deal with it. But at the same time, when it is necessary, it's good to speak, but know how to speak effectively.
Yeah.
Now, at this point,
I think the cub. Oh, go ahead.
yeah,
Go ahead.
continue. I know what I'm going to ask you, anyways.
Okay. I was saying that caveat is so important because what happens to the persons who are one extreme or the other? You have those who are these extreme peacemakers who just walk away and persons can say anything about them. And you have the persons who don't back down, never give up. But it comes to a point where you have to find that nuance where you have to say, hey, this person said something. I'm going to take a few seconds to process it. And I'm going to tell them one, I'm not going to go back to back with you. I'm going to tell you one thing. Listen, you didn't understand the perspective I'm coming from. Or listen, I don't appreciate that, and leave it right there. I think that's something persons tend not to do, which is say what I have to say as calm as possible, with as much command though, not that type of aggressive command, but listen, here's what I believe, here's what I stand for, here's whatever, here's the clarification required. And then saying, listen, I don't want to engage in any sort of additional conversation which would break apart or lead to any destruction here. And you just leave it right there. So it's not being a doormat as you mentioned, but at the same time, it's not being the other extreme, which is this aggressive type of person, which sometimes society admires, but being the person who actually stands for the right thing, which is peace at the same time, protection of your peace and the protection of the peace of the other person simultaneously. Yeah.
Yes, indeed. And if we even look at it in the form in like ministry, like Christian ministry, let's say as a witness, you're trying to talk to somebody about the love of Christ or to join your church, and this person responds in a disrespectful or a very abrasive way. If in the moment of trying to defend yourself, you speak in a very harsh way, like returning the energy, in the
Hmm.
spiritual sense, is like the very defense that you make, it can basically push that person away from
Away.
God forever.
Yeah.
So it's good to really turn the other cheek with discernment for
Yeah.
the greater good.
Yes.
Now I understand, I know that you're in lower sixth form right now, or grade 12, and
Hmm.
I'm wondering, you are doing, what do you call it, communication studies right now?
Yes. Communication style.
All right. At any point in your studies, or in even in debates in our personal research, have you came upon the topic or concept of critical thinking?
Yes. Yes. Definitely.
All right. Now, for the listeners, could you please explain what is critical thinking and why is it important for young people to develop critical thinking at an early point? Because admittedly, I didn't learn about the term or the concept of critical thinking until I was in university.
Mhm. Well, I'm not as averse to it as I think I want to be because I think I'm not understanding the topic per se. But from my understanding, it's It's really evaluating and understanding information that you perceive from your reality or from a situation, and then coming to an informed decision based on those inputs or those informational inputs you're getting, and thinking about the best decision through a purely judgmental, objective, or even sometimes emotional standpoint. So you're using different pieces of information and putting them together to come to a general conclusion, which is best to move on or to do something or to that type of thing. So that's my basic understanding. I'm quite sure you have more to say though, but that's kind of what I think of it as.
Okay, thank you for that. So what I got is that you're saying that critical thinking involves being able to come to an informed decision or conclusion about something, not just from your perceived reality, but with the analysis of facts as well.
Mm-hmm.
At this point, I'd like to introduce a scene that I learned from one of my past employers, or more like supervisor. She said to me, Miguel, the pen is mightier than the sword. Have you ever heard that before?
Yes, it doesn't trap back something.
Okay, the pen is mightier than the sword. What she was saying is that when it comes on to certain conflicts or situations, instead of trying to express yourself verbally and passionately in that moment to be right or to be justified, it's good to hone the skill of writing how you feel, writing what you experienced, because one, writing has a more permanent record of what happens, and writing also allows one to be able to slow down and process information on paper that other persons can more accurately understand as well. So in the context of teaching, we did this a lot. You have, as a teacher, let's say I had a conflict with a student where a student and I had an altercation, and the student makes a report, I make my counter report as well, or I make my report, the student makes a counter report. What I've experienced is that in order for me to get out of certain situations and not to be accused falsely, it was very important that I was able to write my expressions of what happened, or write my thoughts on what happened, not only expressing my feelings but expressing the facts from my perspective and from any other objective sources that I could find to express myself, and that would help a lot. I know this is not to say that, okay, because I'm older and I was a teacher, I use some manipulation tactics now, but whether you're a teacher, whether you're a student, even if you don't have formal education, literacy is very, very important. And it is sad that most persons who are very rash in their behavior in the face of conflicts are those who don't really hone the craft of reading and writing.
Yeah.
And even persons who swear a lot and use certain derogatory language are persons who don't have a strong command of their native vocabulary, that they can use more accurate words to describe how they feel. Because trust me, there is a word for every emotion and every situation, and using the F word or using some other swear word or some other slang really and truly is not necessary when you know how to have a command of your vocabulary, whether it be English or Spanish. But in this context, of course, we're talking about the English language. So it's definitely important to know how to write. Now, you've already learned that, because as a Gold Club member of Jade, right? Is it Jade?
Yes, it is.
Jamaica Association for Debating and Empowerment. I'm sure you've learned extensively about how to construct arguments, but let's remove the word arguments. But I'm sure you've learned how to construct, in the most basic sense, any sentiments that you'd like to express. We know that you have the warrant, the claims and the warrants and the impacts. Well, let's bring it a bit simpler. The peel is, could you explain to the listeners how they can use that in their everyday life when explaining themselves, or any other applicable strategy that they could use?
It explained in terms of a conflict situation.
Yeah, just expressing themselves in a structured way.
Okay, so I guess I can take Peel. Peel is point, evidence, explanation, and link, which I think is a very comprehensive way of someone expressing themselves on at a very eloquent level. So I do think the most important thing when you're trying to converse with anyone is to make your point very clear. And in terms of a strictly disagreement type of context, that's very important because a lot of persons don't understand what you're saying. It's a lot of cloudy words or stuff like that. And a lot of times, again, you still see a lot of anger, which is coming with these radical statements, which don't necessarily have their view. Or we oftentimes hear conversations where persons are saying a lot of things, and then you end up at the end of the conversation like, what was your point? And you realize you guys are speaking about the same thing, just in a different way. So it's very important to clarify off the bat your point. And then I want to put evidence and explanation together in one, because in certain conversations, the evidence is just not going to be compelling enough. You simply want to tell someone the reason why you believe that the point is true. And sometimes, probably not with logic, but with perspective, with a story or something else, which shifts this conversation. That's all up to the intuition that you have in that moment, which is, what type of person is this? Is this someone that I'm going to get through to them with facts, or do I have to go and paint the picture a different way? I think that's the most important part of communication. Certain persons will never appreciate the statistic. Certain persons will never appreciate the actual logical truth. That person will love the story you had from 10 years ago or about 5 years ago, to be more realistic, which is emotional and touching and actually compels you in a certain way because they now understand the perspective you're coming from. So don't necessarily restrict this just, as in debating terms, all this list of information. Sometimes it requires one story, a bit of silence, and that person will understand where you're coming from. And then linking it back. The story can go a lot of places. You say, because of my experience, because of this person's experience, this is why I'm coming to the idea, or this is why my point is that. And when you come through that three-step framework of, the point, some sort of evidence or reason why, and then a link, you perfectly are compelling what you're trying to communicate to this person, because you start with the obvious point, you're being as direct as possible with what you mean, but then you give them something to soften it down. Hey, here's the reason why. From my heart or from my head or from my belly, here's the reason why I believe this. And then not losing the plot, sticking to the point and saying, hey, let's link this back to the reason why I believe here. And that's really a comprehensive way of communicating, but especially in conflict where persons tend to, one, lose understanding of what you're trying to say, two, not understand a proper substantiation at an emotional level sometimes, or even at a factual level, to why you believe this. And then sometimes as you go further into these arguments, these persons just tend to think that all the things that you're saying doesn't have relevance to the initial point. You have to link it back. So it's not just about logic here, but it really encompasses every aspect of our being, at an emotional level, at a spiritual level, and at a logical level, and that's what that kind of does. Heal kind of encompasses all of those things for me.
Yes. Thank you very much for that explanation. And as I've been saying this for every episode so far, he who has an ear to hear, let him hear. And I tend to say that when a guest expresses themselves very profoundly, and if someone doesn't take the time to listen, the information will just go right over their head instead of them really taking the time to listen. So I hope that, persons would have understood that. But in case they didn't understand that, we're going to try an activity at this time where one thing about Wolmer's is that we love to do our mock debates. And this is not really a trade secret. Everybody should debate at the end of the day. Everybody should practice,
Yes.
forming arguments or sentiments in expressing themselves. We do that a lot. So at this time, we are going to do a little mock debate, and we're going to see how we both explain ourselves, our surrounding this, right? Now, we're gonna use something very basic, very nuanced, right? Not even basic. When I use something that was from a conversation just this morning with somebody, and instead of using the typical this house and all of that, let's just say I'm gonna say I. So Kyle, I believe that the US government is hiding from us the fact that aliens are real.
Hmm.
So you're going to oppose that.
Wow.
Again, this
You put
was
me on the
not
spot right
planned.
here. I can't lie to you.
I have no advantage
This
with
was not
this.
planned.
No.
Okay. Oh, go right, Alan. Okay.
All right.
I believe
So Kyle,
fundamentally the U.S. government is the. Oh, go ahead, sir.
I believe that the US government is hiding from the general population that aliens are real because I find that they like to speak in codes when it comes on to certain conversations. Just the other day, I was listening to the news and I saw that a news reporter was talking to Obama and was asking about aliens being at Area 51. And to be honest, I never liked the way how Obama was stammering. And he couldn't even say straight up that, look, aliens are not real. He had to be like, well, when you find them, let me know, or something like that. Like, he could have been like, that's foolishness. Because when I look at evil flat earth, right?
Yeah.
I promise you, listeners, we're not going down that rabbit hole. When it
We're
comes
going
on
at
to the flat earth, everybody for a fact can say, nothing no go so. The rich, the poor, the young, and the old, they look down straight up on persons who say that the earth is flat. So why is it that this president and even Donald Trump couldn't be confident in saying that, look, there aren't any aliens? It's like, hey, it's really up to you to believe what you want to believe. That makes me believe that they have aliens stored in Area 51 or somewhere because, frankly speaking, has the government ever really been honest with us, anyways? So, the fact that we know that there's great distrust with the government makes me believe that, as absurd as it sounds, they're probably communicating with aliens right now.
Wow. Ah, how can I possibly oppose that one? That's the question. Um, okay. Let me say it this way.
I'm sorry. I
I don't
know. I know it's
believe.
very far out.
No, you're fine. You're fine. Let me think of something. Okay, there it is. I believe the American government cannot hide aliens because aliens are uncontrollable animals that could by no means be controlled by normal human beings without some sort of factual or some sort of obvious evidence. The reason why I say this is because right now the only sightings of anything possibly being an alien have been very much mystical or not been anything sort of tangible. And I think that if aliens really did exist, they'd have some sort of clear mark or some way of escaping this Area 51, despite the fact that the US have confined in that way. Granted, you have said that Obama and Trump have been using this language, but I think that's normally what governments do. They don't want to be very explicit or direct. And I'm quite sure that if he was to say anything too explicit, would have given away a lot more things than just aliens. But for me, just because aliens are just such these supernatural creatures, they will find a way out, or they find a way to show themselves out, and we haven't really seen anything as proof of that right now. And that's why I think aliens are not being not being hidden, I should say, by the American government.
Okay, so we're gonna ask each other one cross question at this time, one each. My cross question to you is: so you're saying that you don't believe that the US and aliens are in collusion because aliens can leave at any point. But what if it is a case where they are working in collaboration and it's not the case that the US government literally has aliens under captivity?
Well, there'll be a significant lack of a link which shows how would aliens help the U.S. interest. And if there's no sufficient way of showing that, I don't think there's a way of saying that work in collaboration. Also, would an entity like that want to be suppressed to the extent that they're not public, they're nothing of that sort, they're all this kind of spectacle there? I just don't think a creature would be one to be so hidden with any sort of benefit to their end at all, and to the government's end as well. Yeah, it just seems very ambiguous.
Okay, your question.
And my question is, why do you think aliens would stay put in this confined area with no glory, no sort of incentive to stay there, rather than to hopefully or maybe come with the government? Why would any entity want to be so hidden like that?
Because I think that in being concealed, they have greater effectiveness in carrying out certain means and things that they'd like to do. I think the earth is really fun. So whether we're talking about aliens that can control worlds or cause natural disasters, or aliens that just look weird like the Transformers, it's just amazing how movies are always depicting aliens coming to the earth. So frankly speaking, the fact that there are so many movies portraying so many different types of beings, and they're usually based in the USA, I believe that these movies are like a form of predictive programming, and maybe they're just depicting what is really real, just not shown to the common man.
Interesting.
No, it's just the two of us. There's no adjudicator here. The adjudicator or judges are our listeners. So in the comments, you can tell us what you think about that. But the whole point of that exercise, and thank you by the way, Kyle. The whole point of that exercise was not to prove or disprove aliens, not because I said all of what I said means that I genuinely believe that, and not because Kyle opposed it necessarily means that he actually opposes it either. But there is great strength in not only being able to passionately defend your point or to express yourself, but to also take the time to put yourself in another person's shoes and maybe imagine how a person might be thinking. Not to be personally convinced, but to understand that everyone's reality is different.
Definitely.
So as we close, my final question to you is more like an open question. What words of encouragement do you have for young men and young women who desire to become stronger mentally and emotionally when facing conflict?
I think the words that we have mentioned are just to step back and to allow the person in the driver's seat not to be ego, but to be informed peace. And I think that changes your life, because ego is enemy. That's the bottom line here. That the constant bickering and back to back doesn't really come to an end. And if you continue doing it, you become the target of even greater dialogue of destruction. I think that's something people don't realize. And I was telling to someone in the past that when you think that you're strong in allowing persons to have this sort of bickering and sort of disagreement, people eventually control you because you cannot control your own emotions. That's the biggest advice I give to Caribbean men specifically. And of course, the international persons listening, but specifically to us, because we for so long have not been taught to regulate your emotions. And it leads to certain types of conflict, Mr. Foster, where these persons are angry not only because of the situation, they lose focus from the situation. They're now expressing all the hidden pain from their childhood upwards. And that's where we see all those weird and absurd cases of persons killing other persons for the most stupid reasons, because it hits the final point in their lives where the anger just reveals itself. So the best advice, and I mentioned first to step back, but to check yourself before you reach in any situation like that. and to know where you are emotionally and to take the step back. You mentioned writing down. Write down what you feel, because for too long men have been told that emotion is weakness. But we have to realize it's a part of us nevertheless. And if we don't regulate it and find a way to open a chasm in our lives and find a way out in the most destructive ways, and rather in relationships or sometimes in those conflicts we think will not be damaging, but would damage us for the rest of our lives. So that's the two things. Step back sometimes. Don't let pride take the driver's seat. The second thing, most importantly, is if it's through writing, if it's through talking to a partner, or for instance, in my younger context, talking to a family member, talking to a parent, regulate your emotions and know where you stand with them before they control you. And when it's too late, it ends up affecting you in the most adverse ways. That's my final.
Thank you very much. And I was going to say just one thing in addition, but you already said it. Right. When you can't speak, right. And that has definitely helped me a lot over the past few years. And journaling is a very underrated thing, and it's not a feminine thing at all to do. Both males and females can write, and that's not something that you have to share with anybody. Taking the time to write will definitely help you to regulate your emotions, process conflicts, and know how to respond effectively. So thank you very much, Kyle, for being here and sharing all that is on your mind. The amazing thing is that you are not even 20 years old as yet, so you have a lot of living ahead of you. You have a lot of experiences to gain and a lot more lessons to learn. And if you're able to express yourself this articulately, no, you definitely have a bright future ahead of you. So I encourage you to continue growing, continue being an example and a shining light to everyone that you meet, even those that you don't even meet, but persons who see you from afar. Always try to live upright, because you definitely have a lot to give to the world. So thank you once again.
Thank you so much as well, sir.
To all our listeners, thank you for listening to this episode of the ChiselMe Podcast. If this episode sharpened you, please share it with a man or woman who is on his or her journey as well. Remember, becoming is a daily choice. So keep chiseling, keep becoming. I'm Miguel Foster. I was here with Kyle Kameka. Until next time.